The Emperor Tax Force stood on the observation deck of his flagship, watching the green world of Kepler 442b burn beneath him. Smoke columns rose like twisted fingers reaching toward the void, marking where human settlements once thrived. His forearms hung loose at his sides, satisfaction filling his chest cavity as he observed the completion of what his military called Operation Clean Slate. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. Their towering forms, standing nearly 10 feet tall with chitinous exoskeletons and compound eyes, had conquered over 400 species. Each victory followed the same pattern: identify, overwhelm, subjugate, and integrate. But humans had proven different, stubborn, defiant. They fought with a ferocity that unsettled even veteran Zephyrian commanders. "Your Magnificence," came the clicking voice of General Kethran, his primary military advisor. "The final count has been verified. 5,731 human juveniles have been eliminated. Their educational facilities are nothing but ash now." Thaxivor's mandibles clicked in what passed for approval among his species. The humans had established these learning centers on 17 different worlds along the frontier. Intelligence suggested they were not merely schools but training grounds where human young learned to fight, to resist, to carry their species' inexplicable refusal to submit. Destroying them would break the spirit of human resistance once and for all. "Excellent work, General. Have the parents been informed?" "Yes, Your Magnificence. We broadcast the recordings to every human settlement across their territory." The message was clear: surrender completely or watch more of their offspring burn. The Emperor moved to his command throne, a biomechanical construct that interfaced directly with his nervous system. Through it, he could feel the pulse of his vast fleet, sense the loyalty of his troops, and monitor the countless worlds under his dominion. Everything operated according to Zephyrian order, Zephyrian efficiency, Zephyrian superiority. Reports flooded in from across human space. On New Terra, resistance fighters had laid down their weapons. On Proxima Colony, the governor had sent formal surrender documents. World after world, the humans were finally accepting their place in the natural order of things. The strong ruled the weak, the advanced subjugated the primitive, the many overwhelmed the few. Admiral Vexith approached the throne with data tablets clutched in her smaller arms. "Your Magnificence, we're receiving communication attempts from several human worlds. They appear to be requesting negotiations for complete surrender." "Ignore them for now," Thaxivor commanded. "Let them stew in their defeat. When we're ready, we'll accept their surrender on our terms. Total capitulation. Complete integration into the Empire. Their resistance ends today, but something felt different. In all his conquests, the Emperor had never needed to target juveniles specifically. The humans fought with such passion, such impossible determination, that conventional conquest had failed repeatedly. They didn't fight like other species, with calculation and self-preservation as primary motivators. They fought like wild animals defending their territory, willing to die rather than yield. The human homeworld Earth remained beyond Zephyrian reach for now. Their defensive networks were surprisingly sophisticated, their military more organized than initial intelligence had suggested. But with their frontier colonies surrendering and their children dead, Earth would have no choice but to negotiate. The Emperor could afford to be patient. He pulled up holographic displays showing human space. Dozens of worlds, hundreds of settlements, billions of lives now under his control. The humans would join the Empire as all others had, contributing their labor and resources to Zephyrian glory. Their strange tendency toward individual initiative might even prove useful once properly channeled. "Your Magnificence," General Kethran returned, his posture indicating urgency. "We're detecting unusual energy signatures from several human worlds. Our monitoring stations are picking up massive power buildups." Thaxvor's compound eyes focused on the tactical displays. Indeed, energy readings were spiking across human territory, but they weren't weapon signatures. They resembled communications arrays, broadcasting equipment, something designed to send messages rather than deal destruction. Probably final surrender broadcasts, the Emperor mused, or perhaps memorial services for their dead young. Let them mourn. It changes nothing. The bridge fell silent except for the humming of ship systems and the occasional click of Zephyrian communication. Outside the viewports, space stretched endlessly, filled with the lights of conquered worlds and the promise of future victories. The Emperor settled deeper into his throne, already planning the integration protocols for human worlds. He had no way of knowing that across human space, every communications array was indeed powering up. But they weren't broadcasting surrenders or holding memorial services. They were sending a single message, racing toward Earth at the speed of light, carrying news of what had happened to the children. The message was simple. They killed our babies. All of them. Send everything. The Emperor Thaxvor had ruled the galaxy for centuries, conquered hundreds of worlds and subjugated countless species. He understood power, strategy, and the mathematics of conquest, but he had never encountered anything like humanity's response to the unthinkable. He had never seen what happened when beings who loved their children more than their own lives learned that those children had been murdered. Soon, he would learn the difference between defeating an enemy and awakening something that should have been left alone. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the war room deep beneath Geneva. Her hands pressed flat against the cold metal table as she stared at the incoming reports. Each data stream brought worse news than the last. Kepler 442b, New Babylon. Frontier Station 7, 17 worlds total. All the schools, all the children. The room buzzed with activity as officers coordinated responses across human space, but Sarah heard none of it. Her mind kept returning to the footage the Zephyrians had transmitted, showing burning buildings that had once housed laughing children. The aliens wanted humanity to see what resistance cost. They wanted fear. Admiral, Lieutenant Morrison's voice cut through her thoughts. Priority communication from the Joint Chiefs. They're ordering immediate mobilization of all reserves. Sarah nodded without looking up. Around the table, holographic displays showed the true scope of human military power, assets the Zephyrians had never detected. For 50 years since first contact went wrong, humanity had prepared for this moment. Every colony world maintained hidden shipyards. Every asteroid belt concealed weapons platforms. Every trade route supported supply networks for a war machine built in secret. Status report on Operation Sleeping Giant, she commanded. Major Williams stepped forward, his tablet displaying cascading green confirmations. All deep space assets are responding. The Mars shipyards are launching everything they've got. Luna Command reports full weapons activation. The asteroid belt facilities are spinning up their production lines to maximum capacity. Sarah finally looked up. Her officers saw something in her expression that made them stand straighter, speak more precisely. This wasn't the woman who had spent years fighting border skirmishes with Zephyrian scouts. This was something harder, colder, more focused. What about the stealth fleets? Ghost Squadron is already moving towards Zephyrian space, Williams reported. Admiral Reyes estimates they'll reach the outer systems in 6 days. The Phantom Wing is 3 days behind them. All crews have seen the footage, Admiral. They know what they're fighting for. The displays around the room showed humanity's true strength revealing itself. Ships emerged from asteroid hideouts. Weapons platforms powered up from cold storage, and millions of personnel reported to duty stations they'd hoped never to use. The Zephyrians thought they faced a small, desperate resistance. They had no idea they'd awakened something that had spent half a century preparing for total war. Ma'am, Communications Officer Zhang interrupted. We're receiving surrender demands from the Zephyrian fleet. Emperor Thaxvor is offering terms for Earth's capitulation. Sarah walked to the main display, watching red dots mark Zephyrian positions throughout human space. They'd spread themselves thin, confident in their victory, occupying worlds they thought were defeated. Perfect. Send a reply, she said quietly. Tell the Emperor we have terms of our own. The room fell silent. Everyone knew the chain of command, understood that Admiral Chen couldn't authorize negotiations without approval from higher authority. But they also knew what they'd all seen, what those dead children meant to every human in uniform. Admiral, Zhang said carefully. What terms should I transmit? Sarah turned back to the holographic display, her finger tracing the positions of Zephyrian fleets. Tell him we'll accept nothing less than unconditional surrender. His forces will withdraw from all human territory immediately. His government will submit to human oversight, and every officer involved in targeting civilian populations will face trial for war crimes. Major Williams cleared his throat. Admiral, the Joint Chiefs haven't authorized those terms. We don't have permission to demand Zephyrian surrender. Then get me the President on secure channel, Sarah replied, because those are the only terms humanity is offering. The communications array hummed to life, establishing connection with the highest levels of human government. Sarah knew what the response would be. Every parent on Earth had seen those burning schools. Every grandmother had watched footage of children running from Zephyrian soldiers. The politicians would authorize anything that promised justice for the dead. Within minutes, President Martinez's face appeared on the main screen. Behind him, Sarah could see the crisis room filled with advisors, generals, and cabinet members. All of them wore the same expression she'd seen in her own mirror that morning. Cold fury barely contained by professional discipline. "Admiral Chen," the president said without preamble, "you have full authorization to pursue military objectives as you see fit. Rules of engagement are suspended for Zephyrian military targets. Anything they can dish out, we can return tenfold." "Understood, Mr. President. What about their demand for surrender?" Martinez leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. "Tell them we don't negotiate with child killers. Tell them humanity remembers every single name of every single child they murdered. And tell them we're coming." The connection ended, leaving Sarah alone with her officers and the weight of what came next. For decades, humanity had hidden its true capabilities, appearing weak and divided to potential enemies. Now the masks came off. Now the galaxy would see what humans became when someone hurt their children. "All stations, this is Admiral Chen," she announced over the fleet-wide communications. "Operation Sleeping Giant is now active. All hidden assets are weapons-free. All stealth units proceed to assigned targets. Priority mission: locate and neutralize every Zephyrian military asset in human space." She paused, thinking of her own daughter who had died on Kepler 442b, then continued. "Secondary mission: make sure the galaxy understands that humanity protects its own. No matter the cost. No matter how long it takes. We're going to show the Zephyrians what happens when you declare war on the wrong species." The war room erupted into coordinated activity as orders flowed across human space. Ships that had hidden for decades powered up their weapons. Soldiers who had trained in secret reported to duty. And somewhere in the void between stars, Admiral Chen knew the Zephyrians were about to learn the most important lesson in galactic politics: never threaten human children. General Cathron's confidence began to crack as the first reports arrived. The humans weren't surrendering. Instead, energy signatures across their territory indicated massive military mobilization. Ships were appearing on sensors where none had existed before, emerging from asteroid fields and hidden installations like insects crawling from disturbed nests. "Your Magnificence," he clicked nervously as he approached the Emperor's throne. "Our occupation forces are reporting unusual activities in human space. Multiple unidentified vessels are approaching our positions." Emperor Thaxvor remained focused on his tactical displays, studying the scattered positions of his fleets. The humans controlled 47 star systems, most with minimal defensive capabilities. His forces held overwhelming advantages in firepower, numbers, and technology. These new contacts were probably desperate attempts to evacuate civilian populations. "How many ships are we detecting, General?" "Initial counts suggest approximately 200 vessels, Your Magnificence. But the numbers keep changing. Our sensors are having difficulty maintaining accurate tracking." The Emperor's mandibles clicked with amusement. 200 ships against the entire Zephyrian navy? These humans are more foolish than I imagined. Order our fleets to intercept and destroy any approaching vessels. Make examples of them. But the tactical displays told a different story than what the Emperor wanted to see. The red dots representing Zephyrian fleets suddenly seemed very small against the growing cloud of blue contacts emerging throughout human space. What had started as 200 ships became 500, then 1,000. Then numbers that made experienced Zephyrian officers question their instruments. Admiral Vexith rushed to the throne, her smaller arms trembling with urgency. "Your Magnificence, we need to reconsider our positions. The humans appear to have significantly more military assets than our intelligence indicated." "Impossible," Thaxvor replied, but his voice carried less certainty than before. "Our scouts have monitored human space for decades. We know their capabilities." "Perhaps they've been hiding ships," Vexith suggested, "using stealth technology or concealing vessels in asteroid fields. The numbers we're seeing now suggest they may have been preparing for large-scale conflict." The Emperor rose from his throne, his full height making even his tallest officers seem small. Around the bridge, displays showed Zephyrian forces spread across human territory, each fleet confident in its local superiority. But those forces had been positioned for occupation duty, not major fleet engagements. Alert all commands, he ordered. Consolidate our fleets into defensive formations. If the humans want to throw away their lives in futile attacks, we'll accommodate them. The first engagement reports arrived within hours. The Zephyrian Fourth Fleet, occupying the Proxima system, encountered 30 human vessels emerging from the outer asteroid belt. Admiral Kekstar, commanding the Fourth Fleet, transmitted his engagement with typical Zephyrian confidence. Unknown human vessels. This is Admiral Kekstar of the Zephyrian Navy. You are entering a military occupation zone. Surrender immediately or face destruction. The human response came in the form of weapons fire that no Zephyrian had ever seen before. Particle beams that cut through armor like tissue. Missiles that moved too fast for point defense systems. Energy shields that deflected Zephyrian. Weapons while allowing human fire to pass through. Unhindered, Admiral Kekstar's flagship lasted 7 minutes. General Kethran watched the tactical display with growing horror as blue dots swarmed around red ones throughout human space. The Fourth Fleet died in less than an hour. The Seventh Fleet reported heavy casualties before their transmissions cut off entirely. The Second Fleet retreated to defensive positions around a gas giant, only to discover human ships rising from concealment within the planet's rings. Your Magnificence. Catherine's voice had lost its usual military precision. We're losing contact with our forward elements. The humans appear to have been preparing for this conflict far longer than we realized. Emperor Thaxfor studied the displays with the cold calculation that had made him ruler of the galaxy. His fleets were strong, experienced, well-equipped. But they were scattered across dozens of systems, each one now facing human forces that fought with technology and tactics no one had anticipated. Recall all forces to the Kepler 442b system, he commanded. We'll consolidate our strength and crush these upstart humans in one decisive battle. But even as he gave the orders, more reports arrived. Human fleets weren't just attacking Zephyrian positions in their own space. They were striking at Zephyrian bases in neutral territory, hitting supply convoys deep behind the front lines, and engaging scout forces at the very edges of the Empire. Admiral Vexith's compound eyes flickered between displays as she tried to process the scope of human military action. Your Magnificence, they're not fighting defensively. This appears to be a coordinated offensive across multiple sectors. They're targeting our logistics networks, our communication relays, our forward bases. How is that possible? Thaxfor demanded. Our intelligence showed them as a minor frontier species with limited military capabilities. Perhaps, Vexith said quietly. Our intelligence was wrong. The Emperor turned to his tactical officers, studying their expressions. These were veterans of a dozen campaigns, beings who had helped conquer half the galaxy. But now they looked uncertain, even afraid. The humans weren't fighting like any species the Zephyrians had encountered before. Sir, Communications Officer Yethlon reported. We're receiving a transmission from human forces. They're demanding our immediate surrender. The bridge fell silent. In 12,000 years of galactic dominance, no species had ever demanded Zephyrian surrender. The very concept seemed impossible, a violation of natural law. Put it through, the Emperor commanded. The voice that emerged from the speakers was female, calm, and absolutely without compromise. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Fleet. You have 48 hours to withdraw all Zephyrian forces from human territory and submit to international war crimes tribunals. Any Zephyrian vessel that fires on human civilians or military personnel after this transmission will be considered hostile and destroyed. General Kethrin's mandibles clicked with nervous energy. Your Magnificence, should we respond? Emperor Thaxfor stared at the tactical displays, watching his scattered fleets trying to regroup under constant human attack. For the first time in his long reign, he faced an enemy that seemed to understand war better than he did. Send no reply, he decided. Ready the fleet for combat. If these humans want a war, we'll give them the full might of the Zephyrian Empire. But deep in his compound mind, a small voice whispered that perhaps killing those children had been a mistake. Not a moral mistake, which meant nothing to Zephyrian thinking, but a tactical one. Perhaps they had awakened something that should have been left sleeping. Captain Maria Santos gripped the command chair of the UES Retribution as her ship emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442b system. Around her, 49 other vessels materialized from the void, their hulls bearing the scars of previous engagements and their crews burning with shared purpose. This was Ghost Squadron, humanity's most elite formation, and they had come to the place where 5,731 children had died. Captain, Lieutenant Park reported from the sensor station, detecting massive Zephyrian fleet presence. Count is over 300 vessels, including their flagship. Maria nodded grimly. Intelligence had suggested the Emperor himself was here, consolidating his forces for what he probably thought would be a decisive battle. Perfect. She wanted to look into his compound eyes when humanity's response arrived. All ships, maintain radio silence, she commanded. Activate ghost protocols. Let's see how close we can get before they notice us. The human vessels seemed to fade from existence as their stealth systems engaged. Advanced metamaterials bent light around their hulls, while specialized field generators masked their energy signatures. To Zephyrian sensors, Ghost Squadron had simply vanished, leaving only the empty void where they'd appeared. But Maria wasn't interested in a standard engagement. She'd studied the footage of burning schools, memorized the names of every child who'd died. This wasn't about military victory anymore. This was about justice. Helm, take us into the debris field, she ordered. Navigation. I want us threading between those orbital platforms. If we're going to send a message, we need to deliver it personally. The Retribution glided through space like a predator stalking prey, weaving between chunks of destroyed space stations and the wreckage of human colonies. Other ships in the squadron followed similar paths, approaching the massive Zephyrian fleet from multiple angles while remaining completely invisible. On the bridge of his flagship, Emperor Thaxivor studied tactical displays that showed only empty space. His consolidated fleet occupied strong defensive positions around Kepler 442b, with overlapping fields of fire and multiple fallback positions. Any human attack would face concentrated firepower from hundreds of ships. Your Magnificence, Admiral Vexith reported. Our scouts have detected human fleet movements in the outer system. Estimated numbers suggest they're massing for a major assault. Excellent, Thaxivor replied. Let them come. Here in open space, our superior numbers and firepower will decide the battle. No more surprises, no more hidden bases, just ship against ship. But Ghost Squadron had already penetrated the Zephyrian formation, their stealth ships moving between enemy vessels like whispers in the dark. Maria watched the massive alien flagship grow larger on her view screen, its biomechanical hull bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. Captain, Weapons Officer Chang whispered, we're in optimal firing position. All torpedo tubes loaded with antimatter warheads. Maria shook her head. Negative. Target their weapon systems only. I want the Emperor alive to hear what I have to say. Around the squadron, other captains received similar orders. This wasn't about destroying the Zephyrian fleet, though they certainly could. This was about sending a very specific message about what happened when someone murdered human children. All ships, Maria broadcast on tight beam communications. Weapons free, disable, don't destroy. We want survivors. Ghost Squadron struck like lightning in vacuum. 50 stealth ships opened fire simultaneously from point-blank range, their weapons targeting engines, weapons, and life support systems across the Zephyrian fleet. Antimatter warheads detonated against armor plating. Particle beams severed weapon mounts, and quantum torpedoes punched through shields that weren't designed to stop attacks from within the formation. In 30 seconds, the most powerful fleet in Zephyrian history became a collection of drifting hulks. Emperor Thaxivor felt his flagship shudder as weapons fire struck from impossible angles. Alarms blared across the bridge as systems failed throughout the ship. But what terrified him most was that he still couldn't see the attackers. Report, he commanded. But his officers were scrambling to make sense of sensor readings that showed damage without sources, weapons fire without origins. Then the stealth fields dropped, and 50 human warships appeared within his formation like ghosts made manifest. They hung in space around disabled Zephyrian vessels, their weapons still trained on targets but no longer firing. This is Captain Maria Santos of the Human Defense Fleet, came a transmission on all frequencies. Emperor Thaxivor, you wanted to send humanity a message. Now we have a message for you. The Emperor activated his personal communicator, his voice carrying across space to the human ships. I am Emperor Thaxivor of the Zephyrian Empire. You have attacked the sovereign forces of a galactic power. This act of aggression will not be tolerated. Maria's response came immediately, her voice cold as vacuum. You murdered 5,131 children. Their names are Rebecca Chen, age 7, Marcus Williams, age 9. Sarah Thompson, age 6. She continued reading names, each one delivered with precise pronunciation and the child's age. The list went on for minutes, broadcast across all channels so every Zephyrian in the fleet could hear. Rebecca and Marcus and Sarah and thousands of others, reduced to ash because an emperor thought killing children would break human resistance. When the list ended, silence filled the communication channels. Then Maria spoke again. Those children were under our protection. They were innocents who posed no threat to your empire. You killed them to terrorize us into submission. That was your first mistake. Your second mistake, came another voice as Admiral Sarah Chen's fleet dropped out of hyperspace around the system, was thinking we would surrender instead of making you pay for every single life. The space around Kepler 442b filled with human warships, thousands of vessels that had been hidden throughout the galaxy. Waiting for this moment, they formed up in perfect formations, their weapons trained on the disabled Zephyrian fleet. Your magnificence, General Kethron whispered. We're completely surrounded. Our ships are disabled. Our weapons are offline. Emperor Thaxvor stared at the tactical displays showing more human ships than his intelligence had suggested existed. They'd been hiding their true strength for decades, building in secret, preparing for a war he'd thought would be a simple conquest. This is Admiral Chen, came the transmission. Emperor Thaxvor, you have one choice. Surrender your fleet and submit to trial for war crimes, or watch us demonstrate what happens when someone threatens human children. The Emperor looked around his bridge at officers who'd conquered dozens of worlds, beings who'd never known defeat. Now they waited for his decision, surrounded by an enemy that had appeared from nowhere and demonstrated capabilities no one had imagined. For the first time in his long reign, Thaxvor began to understand that he'd made a terrible miscalculation. The word that changed everything came not from Emperor Thaxvor's compound mind or his military advisors, but from an unexpected source. Deep within the disabled flagship's communication array, a single transmission pod had survived the human attack. Inside that pod, a young Zephyrian communications officer named Jexalara was trying to send a desperate message to the Empire's homeworld. But as she worked, Jexalara found herself listening to the human transmissions flooding the communication channels. The list of names, the ages of the dead children, the cold precision with which the humans described what they would do to anyone who threatened their young. Jexalara was barely past her own molting season, equivalent to a human teenager. Unlike older Zephyrians who had grown up during the Empire's expansion, she had been raised on stories of conquered worlds and subjugated species. But she had never seen actual combat, never witnessed the reality of what conquest meant for the conquered. She thought of her own nest siblings, the small Zephyrians who would one day take their places in the Empire's hierarchy. She imagined them in burning buildings calling for parents who would never come. The thought sent tremors through her exoskeleton. Officer Jexalara, came General Kethron's voice through the internal communication system. Status report on long-range communications. Jexalara keyed her microphone but hesitated. Around her, the ship's corridors echoed with the sounds of damage control and emergency repairs. Through the bulkheads, she could hear older officers discussing the human fleet surrounding them, the impossible technology that had disabled an entire Zephyrian formation in seconds. Officer Jexalara, respond immediately, Kethron commanded. Sir, she finally replied, communications are severely damaged. I cannot establish contact with the homeworld. It was a lie. The communication pod was functioning perfectly. But as Jexalara listened to more human transmissions, she began to understand something that her superiors had missed. The humans weren't fighting for territory or resources or dominance. They were fighting because someone had killed their children. On the bridge, Emperor Thaxvor faced the most difficult decision of his 12,000-year reign. Admiral Chen's ultimatum hung in the air like a weapon waiting to fall. Surrender and face trial, or watch his fleet burn around him. Your Magnificence, Admiral Vexith spoke quietly. Perhaps we should consider their terms. Our fleet is disabled. Our weapons are offline. Continued resistance may result in complete destruction. Thaxvor's mandibles clicked with rage. The Zephyrian Empire does not surrender to inferior species. We have ruled this galaxy for millennia. We will not bow to jumped-up primitives who barely understand space travel. But sir, Vexith pressed, they've demonstrated technological capabilities that exceed our own. Their stealth systems, their weapons, their fleet coordination. Perhaps they're not as primitive as we believed. The Emperor turned to study the tactical displays one more time. Thousands of human ships surrounded his position, their weapon signatures indicating firepower that could reduce his entire fleet to debris in minutes. Yet they held their fire, waiting for his response to their ultimatum. "General Kethran," he commanded, "prepare the self-destruct sequence for the entire fleet. If we cannot win, we'll ensure these humans learn the price of challenging the Empire." But from her communication pod deep in the ship, Jexalara was listening to everything. She heard the Emperor's order and understood what it meant. Thousands of Zephyrian crew members would die, not in battle, but in a gesture of spite. And the humans would probably retaliate by attacking Zephyrian worlds, starting a war that would consume the galaxy. She thought again of her Nest siblings, of young Zephyrians across the Empire, who would grow up in a universe where humans hunted their species with the same merciless efficiency they'd displayed here. Was that what the Empire's honor was worth? Jexalara made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. She activated the communication pod's emergency broadcast function and transmitted on all frequencies, ensuring both the Zephyrian fleet and the surrounding human ships would receive her message. "This is Communications Officer Jexalara aboard the Zephyrian flagship. I wish to speak directly with the human fleet commander." The bridge fell silent as her transmission reached every ship in the system. General Kethran's voice exploded through the communication system. "Officer Jexalara, you are not authorized to communicate with enemy forces. Cease transmission immediately." But Admiral Chen's response came first. "This is Admiral Chen. Go ahead, Officer Jexalara." Jexalara's voice trembled as she spoke, knowing that every word would be heard by both fleets and probably recorded for history. "Admiral Chen, I have heard the names of your dead children. I understand why you fight. I have Nest siblings of my own, young ones who depend on their elders to protect them." "What is your point, officer?" Chen replied. "My point is that Emperor Thaxvor has ordered the self-destruction of our entire fleet. Thousands of Zephyrian crew members will die, not in honorable battle but as a gesture of defiance."
"Many of them are young, like your children were."
"Like I am." The communication channels crackled with tension as both fleets absorbed this information. On the bridge of his flagship, Thaxvor's compound eyes blazed with fury. "Arrest that officer immediately," he commanded. "She has committed treason against the Empire." But Jexalara continued broadcasting. "Admiral Chen, I cannot speak for my Emperor or my species, but I can speak for myself. The murder of children is wrong, no matter who commits it. I formally surrender myself to human authority and request protection under whatever laws govern the treatment of prisoners." Her words hung in the void between the fleets like a bridge across an impossible chasm. For the first time in galactic history, a Zephyrian had acknowledged that the Empire could be wrong. Admiral Chen's response came after a long pause. "Officer Jexalara, your surrender is accepted. You will be granted full protection under human military law. Can you disable the self-destruct sequence?" "I am trying, Admiral, but I need time." Throughout the Zephyrian fleet, other young officers heard Jexalara's words and began to question orders they'd never thought to challenge. Some followed her example, broadcasting their own surrenders. Others remained loyal to the Empire but found themselves unable to carry out self-destruct orders, while their shipmates pleaded for mercy. Emperor Thaxvor realized that something fundamental had changed. Not just in this battle, but in the nature of the Empire itself. The word that changed everything wasn't spoken by him, or his advisors or his enemies. It was spoken by a frightened young communications officer who had looked into the abyss of endless war and chosen a different path. The word was wrong. Officer Jexalara worked frantically at her communication console, her smaller arms dancing across control interfaces, while her primary limbs accessed the ship's emergency systems. Around her, the sound of running footsteps echoed through the corridors as security forces tried to reach her position, but the human attack had damaged many of the ship's internal passages, buying her precious time. "Admiral Chen," she transmitted, "I have access to the ship's engineering systems through the communication array. The self-destruct sequence is connected to the ship's main computer core. I can delay it, but I cannot completely disable it without the Emperor's authorization codes." From her position on the UES Retribution, Admiral Chen watched the tactical displays showing growing chaos within the Zephyrian fleet. Some ships were powering down their self-destruct systems as junior officers followed Jexalara's example. Others remained locked in internal conflicts between loyalist crews and those who questioned their orders. "Officer Jexalara," Chen responded, "can you estimate how much time we have?" "The sequence is set for 15 minutes from activation. That gives us perhaps 12 minutes before irreversible cascade failure." Chen turned to her tactical officer. "Commander Park, status on boarding operations?" "Ghost Squadron reports they can breach the flagship's hull in 8 minutes. But Admiral, even if we capture the Emperor, will he provide the abort codes?" Admiral Chen considered the question while watching displays that showed the massive Zephyrian fleet around them. Some ships were already showing signs of internal power failures as their crews sabotaged the self-destruct systems. Others remained fully operational and presumably still loyal to their Emperor. "Probably not," she admitted. "But we have another option. Jexalara, are you still monitoring this channel?" "Yes, Admiral. I want you to open a ship-wide communication channel. Broadcast to every Zephyrian vessel in the fleet. Can you do that?" There was a pause before Jexalara responded. "Yes, but it would violate multiple Imperial regulations. I could face execution for treason." "Officer, you've already committed treason by our Empire's standards," came another Zephyrian voice on the channel. "This is Lieutenant Kexran from the cruiser Void Striker. I've been listening to your transmissions. You're right about the children. You're right about this being wrong." More Zephyrian voices joined the conversation. Junior officers from across the fleet who had heard Jexalara's words and found the courage to speak. Not many, but enough to show that something was changing in the monolithic structure of the Empire. "Admiral Chen," Jexalara said, "the channel is open. The entire fleet can hear us." Chen took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would be heard by thousands of Zephyrians and recorded for galactic history. This was humanity's chance to explain themselves to the species that had tried to conquer them. "Attention Zephyrian fleet," she began. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Fleet. Your Emperor ordered the murder of 5,731 human children. He did this to terrorize us into surrender, but he made a fundamental mistake about human nature." On the bridge of the flagship, Emperor Thaxfor listened with growing rage as a human addressed his fleet directly. "Shut down that transmission," he commanded, but his communications officers reported that their systems were being overridden by Jexalara's equipment. Chen continued, "The Emperor believed that killing our children would break our spirit. Instead, it awakened something that your species has never encountered. Humans don't just love their children. We love all children. We fight to protect them even when they're not our own." In her communication pod, Jexalara felt a strange sensation as she listened to the human admiral. The concept was alien to Zephyrian thinking, where nest loyalty rarely extended beyond immediate family groups. "Your junior officers understand something your leadership has missed," Chen went on. "There is no honor in murdering the defenseless. There is no strategic value in targeting those who cannot fight back. There is no glory in making war on children." Throughout the Zephyrian fleet, young officers listened to words that challenged everything they'd been taught about conquest and dominance. Some rejected the human ideas entirely, but others, like Jexalara, began to see their empire's actions from a different perspective. "You have 7 minutes to abort your self-destruct sequence," Chen announced. "Your officers who have chosen to surrender will be treated with honor and respect. They will be fed, housed, and protected according to human military law. They will see their families again when this war ends." Lieutenant Kexran's voice crackled over the channel. "Admiral, what guarantee do we have? How do we know you won't execute us as war criminals?" "Because," Chen replied, "humans don't kill prisoners. We don't torture captives. We don't target civilians. Even when our enemy does all these things, we maintain our principles. That's the difference between us." On his bridge, Emperor Thaxfor watched his tactical displays with growing horror. More ships were reporting system failures as their crews sabotaged the self-destruct mechanisms. The monolithic loyalty he'd counted on for millennia was cracking under pressure from ideas he'd never considered. "General Kethran," he commanded, "send security forces to arrest every officer who has participated in these transmissions. Execute them for treason." But General Kethran hesitated. "Your Magnificence, that would include approximately 30% of our remaining crew. We need those officers to operate the ships. Then execute every 10th one as an example to the others." The general's mandibles clicked with uncertainty. Around the bridge, senior officers who had served the Empire faithfully for decades found themselves questioning orders they would have followed, without hesitation, just hours earlier. "Admiral Chen," came Jexilara's voice, now stronger and more confident. "I have successfully disabled the self-destruct system on the flagship. The abort codes are transmitting to other vessels in the fleet." "Belay that order," Thaxivor commanded, but his own officers were no longer listening. Admiral Vexith stepped forward, her posture indicating formal challenge to authority. "Your Magnificence, I formally request permission to open surrender negotiations with the human fleet." The Emperor stared at his oldest, most trusted advisor. "You would betray the Empire for these humans?" "No, sir. I would save the Empire from destroying itself for no purpose. Our fleet is disabled. Our crew is in revolt. Our enemy has demonstrated superior capability and tactical thinking. Continued resistance serves no strategic goal." Emperor Thaxivor realized that the word Jexilara had spoken was spreading through his fleet like a virus, infecting minds that had never questioned imperial authority. The idea that the Empire could be wrong was more dangerous than any human weapon, but it was too late to stop it. The word had been spoken, heard, and accepted by those who mattered most. The young officers who would shape the future of both species. Change had begun, and not even an emperor could command it to stop. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, former communications officer Jexilara stood in the observation deck of the human space station Unity, watching ships from a dozen species dock at the massive facility. The station had been built in neutral space, serving as headquarters for the new galactic council that was reshaping interstellar politics. She wore simple human clothing instead of Zephyrian military armor, her choice after requesting asylum from the Human Federation. Around her, delegates from across the galaxy worked together on problems that had once been solved through conquest and subjugation. "Officer Jexilara," came a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see Admiral Sarah Chen approaching, now wearing the insignia of the Council's first military ethics director. "Admiral Chen," Jexilara replied, her English much improved after months of study. "I was not expecting to see you here today." "I wanted to thank you personally," Chen said, joining her at the observation window. "The War Crimes Tribunal just delivered their final verdicts. Your testimony was crucial in establishing the legal frameworks for protecting civilian populations." Jexilara's mandibles clicked softly, a gesture humans had learned indicated thoughtfulness among her species. "I only spoke the truth about what I witnessed. The difficult part was admitting that truth to myself." Through the window, they could see the memorial garden built into Unity Station's central hub. 5,731 small trees grew there, one for each child murdered in the attack that started the war. Each tree bore a plaque with a name, an age, and a brief description of dreams that would never be fulfilled. "What will happen to Emperor Thaxivor?" Jexilara asked. "Life imprisonment," Chen replied. "He'll spend his remaining years studying the civilizations he tried to destroy, learning about the species he considered inferior. Some call it cruel. I call it educational." The trial had lasted 3 months and attracted delegates from every known spacefaring civilization. The evidence was overwhelming: systematic targeting of civilian populations, deliberate attacks on non-military targets, and the attempted genocide of human colonies that refused to surrender. But the trial had accomplished something more important than justice for past crimes. It had established the first truly galactic legal framework, with enforcement mechanisms that could prevent future atrocities. "Admiral," Jexilara said carefully, "I have been thinking about something you said during the battle. About humans protecting children even when they are not your own. Is this truly how your species behaves?" Chen smiled, thinking of her own daughter who had died on Kepler 442b, and of the Zephyrian younglings now living safely in human refugee centers. "It's how we try to behave. We don't always succeed, but we keep trying." "This concept is still difficult for my people to understand," Jexilara admitted. "Zephyrian society emphasizes nest loyalty above all else. Caring for unrelated young seems wasteful of resources." "Maybe," Chen replied, "but human children grow up knowing that an entire species will protect them. They learn that their worth isn't determined by their usefulness or their strength. They understand that their lives matter simply because they exist." The observation deck filled with sounds of multiple languages as delegates from various species discussed the day's agenda. The Galactic Council was still finding its footing, but early successes had encouraged even traditionally isolationist species to participate. "I have received a communication from the Zephyrian homeworld," Jexalara said quietly. "The new government has asked me to return and serve as liaison to human space. Will you accept?" Jexalara was quiet for a long moment, watching the memorial garden where human and alien children played together among the trees that honored the dead. "I think I must. My people need to understand what I learned here. That being wrong is not a sign of weakness, but an opportunity for growth." Admiral Chen nodded. The Zephyrian Empire had collapsed within weeks of Thaxivor's surrender, replaced by a loose confederation of worlds that were still learning how to govern without conquest as their primary tool. The transition was messy, sometimes violent, but it was happening. "There's something else," Chen continued. "The Council has approved funding for a new project. Educational exchanges between species, starting with our youngest populations. Human children will study on Zephyrian worlds, and young Zephyrians will attend human schools. You would trust your children to the species that murdered them?" "We would trust our children to the species that learned from its mistakes," Chen corrected. "The Zephyrians who supported the massacre are gone from power. The ones replacing them understand the cost of targeting innocents." Jexalara thought of her own nest siblings, still young enough to be shaped by new ideas. Perhaps they could grow up in a galaxy where strength was measured by protection rather than destruction, where honor came from nurturing life rather than ending it. "Admiral," she said finally, "when I spoke that word during the battle, when I said the Empire was wrong, I was terrified. I thought it would mean the end of everything I believed. And what did you discover? That ending wrong beliefs is not destruction. It is liberation." On the communication channels between ships, the memorial service for the 5,031 children was beginning. Representatives from every species in the galaxy spoke names, shared memories, and promised that their deaths would not be forgotten. But more importantly, they promised that the lessons learned from those deaths would shape a future where children of all species could grow up in safety, where the strong protected the weak not out of obligation, but out of love. The word that changed everything had been wrong, but the word that would build the future was simpler, more powerful, and infinitely more hopeful. The word was together. As Jexalara prepared to return to her people and Admiral Chen continued her work building galactic peace, neither knew that their conversation was being monitored by young beings across 1,000 worlds. Human children, Zephyrian younglings, and dozens of other species listened to the story of how a frightened communications officer had found the courage to speak truth to power. They would grow up in a galaxy shaped by that courage, in a universe where admitting mistakes was the first step toward making things right. They would inherit the stars not through conquest, but through cooperation. And they would never forget the price paid by 5,131 children to teach the galaxy that some things were worth fighting for, and some words were worth speaking no matter the cost.